he did get hurt. He was diagnosed with a rib cartilage fracture after playing through an injury or playing through that injury in the loss last night. And we got a chance to see Chase Daniel. He did come in for just one play, but a little concerning, you would say, the moment he went down. And he really was laboring, and he immediately pointed towards his side. He was completely uncomfortable. He came out for a play, and obviously that is the NFL rule. If the trainers come on, you got to come out for one play, and then Chase Daniel came in one carry. That was all. But this is something that I would assume that Chargers fans, obviously, they can exhale a little bit, but still have to take some deep breaths when if Herbert cannot practice come next week.
Yeah, I mean, it really seemed like you could tell on the broadcast he was really laboring. Yep. And I think I was listening to the Westwood One call, and they were saying that he seemed almost like a boxer, really trying to cover up and favor that side. So yep. Who knows what the extent of the injury is now and how it will develop over the next week. But as much as we just mentioned about some of the errors in the second half and whatnot, and how we've seen that youth from Justin Herbert the last few years, it's undeniable how talented he is and how good his potential can be as a quarterback, and how much, if he's out for an extended period of time, how much of a massive blow that is for the Chargers, because there's really no room for error given the division they're in. And everybody is really, in a huge position to contend there in that division. Everybody's made big moves and wanting to get to the promised land, into the playoffs and beyond. And you really don't have that much room for error.
Literally zero. And the only thing that would be the saving grace that the Chargers do have, Mike, is Austin Eckler. He's one of the top rushing running backs in this entire NFL. But again, what Justin Herbert means to this squad is bar none. Granted, they already lost Keenan Allen due to injury. Mike Williams looked pretty good. Gerald Everett looked pretty good yesterday, just prior to that bad interception in the fourth quarter, which eventually was that pick six. And then the whole thing too, where if he's out long term, do the Chargers become this team that obviously is they'll obviously become run heavy? But the thing to me is that do their expectations dwindle a little bit with this tough division, this tough AFC West division that they're in? Because they also have to look up to the Raiders too, who, granted, they did lose, and we'll talk about them in a few short moments in our Week 2 preview, but they've got another game to play this upcoming weekend, and it's going to be a must-win for them. So now things might get a little desperate and messy for the Chargers. And you brought it up too. Their depth is very lackluster right now. Granted, they did get Khalil Mack in that trade with Chicago. They did lose Melvin Ingram last year. But there's not a lot of depth on this squad. And I have to agree with you. I think there is zero margin for error.
It's okay when you have issues of depth, because then you have Derwin James, who's just spine busting people left and right on the field.
Yeah, and you look at and yeah, right. And you look at also what Clyde Edwards-Hilaire did as well. And a lot of people in the offseason, I think we were talking about them too, or talking about him too, was that Edwards-Hilaire, CEH, as he's better known in those parts of Kansas City, that he's overrated. He's an overrated running back, but he did not look that yesterday. 8 attempts, 74 yards. Austin Eckler had a tough day against that tough defensive line led by Chris Jones, who is one of the probably best defensive linemen in the NFL. I'm not going to go and say that he's Aaron Donald status or anything along those lines, but Frank Clark, those guys, they just clog up the middle, and they did such a good job yesterday stopping the run, led, of course, by Eckler. Things looked so good for them. And, obviously in Steve Spagnuolo's defense, Mike, we know that the pass was never great. The secondaries that he's always been a part of have not really been great. But it's just that defensive line always. You look back to the Super Bowl years with the Giants, he always had a stout 4-3 defense, and he's got it here with the Chiefs. But, it was for a little while some Swiss cheese, if you will, where people would just run all over Kansas City. But last night, Eckler had a tough time. And again, now that I think about that, when we talk about this part that potentially Herbert could be missing time, if he does, and they play a defensive line or even a defense like the Chiefs played yesterday, they're in serious trouble.
Yeah, I think you're in trouble anyway because how much can Chase Daniel continue to carry the expectations of what you had of a fully healthy Chargers squad. He can be a solid backup. He's been around the league. He's been a veteran or whatnot, but obviously Justin Herbert is the guy. One way or another, it may take a step down, and it's really going to test the coaching ability of Brandon Stanley and where they're going to go, how far they can go this year in terms of his coaching and make up for a possible absence of Herbert. To go on the Chiefs, I think you're spot on with the defense and whatnot. They always want to. Steve Spagnuolo's always wanted to have pressure to the quarterback. You never have to worry about the secondary then if you're able to get that proper rush.
Yep.
And I think it's something that a young Chargers team facing those kind of teams and defensive lines that the Chiefs have. It's a younger team that hasn't really, in terms of playoff appearances yet hasn't earned its stripe as much. They may struggle with it. So this is going to be a real prove it year if Herbert's all healthy and fine. Of where is this Chargers core and their maturity into trying to become a championship team?
Yeah, and Brandon Staley's got a lot of work to do to see if he can, if his team can live up to the hype. So let's rewind a little prior to yesterday's week number 2 beginning. Let's go back to week 1, Mike, and we saw a ton of really fun things. We got a chance to see, of course, and again, even though I am in Philadelphia, Philly almost blew that contest against the Detroit Lions 38-35. But back home in New York, the New York Giants, they look absolutely revitalized. I don't want to say that they are, this Cinderella team that we expect to go all the way or anything along those lines. It was one game. It was one stone cold Brian Daboll call at the end that made the difference. And you saw it in the end. You saw the locker room. You saw the celebration. You saw the way that Daboll was talking to his entire locker room. It was a completely different scene than we've seen in recent years with Joe Judge, with I'm blank. Yeah, thank you very much. With Pat Shurmur. So what you saw there, for those that did not see, the Giants beat the Tennessee Titans 21-20. A minute 9 to go. 20-19 was the score. The Giants were down by 1 point to Tennessee. Do you go for it, or do you go for the extra point to tie it and go into overtime, or do you go and potentially go for the 2 and go for the win? So what does Brian Daboll do? He goes for the win, and they convert. What an amazing job by the Giants to eventually come out of what we did see. And Mike, I know we were talking about this last week. We remember when Daniel Jones was struggling so much that Brian Daboll was yelling at his quarterback. He was yelling at his quarterback, and it looked like that he was done. It looked like maybe Tyrod Taylor could potentially get some reps or anything along those lines if he couldn't figure it out. And then after that conversation, the Giants became alive, and the Titans did not know what hit them.
Yeah, I think it was just a jolt of reality for Jones, where really hasn't had those type of coaches that we thought were going to be strong personalities, but they really haven't. He's been this guy. The franchise is obviously they drafted him a few years ago. They're sticking behind and whatnot, but you never really saw that from the sidelines. Any of the coaches and whatnot seriously, going after Jones, trying to motivate him or really go after him after a bad play or something like that. You hadn't seen that as much, and I think it was a real jolt to reality to Jones that, listen, this is a different coaching staff and one that didn't draft me, and but at the same time they're putting a lot of faith into me, and someone I always say someone who's criticizing you that hard is one who cares, and I think it was just a moment of reality for Jones that Daboll is a real different kind of coach than the last few coaches that I've been with. And, you need to start playing your best football. And I think that sums it up perfectly. Brian Daboll so far, culture changer. And I think it just reflects what New York football has been in the last 5-6 years or whatnot, when we're all celebrating, one game and a week 1 victory like it was a damn Super Bowl. But so I want to temper expectations and all that. The Giants are just going to run ripshot over mediocre teams and go 4-5-0. So I'd want to temper expectations there. But that was probably the most optimism you've seen from a Giants win and a Giants game in 3 to 5 years. They had their moments where they looked like, all right, they can be competitive. And I think that's the biggest goal for the Giants this year. This is not going to be easy. This is not going to be quick of a rebuild yet again under a new coach. But at least there's got to be a step up, and that has to be at least being competitive. And they were absolutely competitive against Tennessee and made some big-time plays down the stretch. And the biggest part of it is if Saquon Barkley may be back, and we saw the return of rookie year Saquon Barkley in week 1. And if we see that again, oh boy, all the people who were looking to, just cut him off and have him traded, and I'm one of them, will look absolutely stupid.
Well, I'll be honest with you. And like I said, our other co-host and our good friend Ian Schraier is not on the show for a while. Has not been on since our last Friday show, which was back in May. But the reason why I bring this up without him is because we could talk about some gambling here. And what I did the moment I crossed the George Washington Bridge a couple of days or yesterday coming here, right? I pulled over on the side and I said, let me look in my Caesars account, which had a few dollars in it. And I said, I'm putting down $5. Pretty cheap of me, right? $5 for the Giants to win the division.
Oh, gosh.
Listen, the reason why I bring this up is because the other topics that we're going to be discussing, the Commanders, they look pretty good. The Cowboys lost Dak Prescott, and the Philadelphia Eagles looked absolutely abysmal in the end on defense. We bring in the next topic, Mike. And the next topic here that I've got before I want to get to your topics that you like from week 1 is how long is the leash for Mike McCarthy, the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys? 19-3 was the score in favor of Tampa Bay. That is not okay. The way that Dak Prescott was playing and the entire offense was playing before Dak got hurt. It was a disaster.
Yeah, absolutely. And Buccaneers or not, that was just incredibly poor. And, we talked about, we previewed the Cowboys, earlier on in this summer. And,
with RJ Ochoa, yeah.
Yeah, RJ was saying how there was going to be potential struggles with the offense. You saw, I don't think everybody really valued the departure of Amari Cooper, how good of a route runner he was and how good of a wide receiver he was. And this is an offense that went from being number 1 statistically in the NFL last year to being an absolute disaster last week, just not being any sort of a factor whatsoever in the game. And I think this was a do or die year for Mike McCarthy either way, that if they did not get to at least the NFC Championship game, he was probably going to be fired. Listen, Jerry Jones has these huge expectations and whatnot, and he always does. How he hypes up this Dallas Cowboys franchise and, throw out their net worth there and America's team, like he likes to say, and all that sort of stuff. So there's always going to be insane expectations. And I think this, like I said, if the Dallas Cowboys don't make the NFC Championship game, which I can almost guarantee that won't happen unless something bizarre occurs, Mike McCarthy will be gone. I think the leash is just really short. I think he could be gone even sooner. I think if Jerry Jones doesn't see the play improve, I think before the trade deadline, he probably fires him, and they probably try and do something on the trade deadline for a quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, the thing to me also is that I look at and I say to myself that because Dak Prescott is hurt yet again, does Mike McCarthy's leash extend a tiny bit more? I personally don't think so. Now, I think that, again, what we have seen with Kellen Moore also running the offense too, things have been very, very stale. Now, granted, as you did say, last year they were statistically number one in almost every single offensive category last year. The way things worked, they had one of the best wide receiver cores, if not the best wide receiver trio in all of the National Football League, with Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup. Now, granted, one is gone and the other is recovering from a torn ACL. Michael Gallup has worked his way back. He signed a lucrative extension with Dallas in the offseason, which was very, very odd. Things you don't typically see when you're nursing an ACL tear or trying to recover from that. But again, you ship away Amari Cooper. You still have CeeDee Lamb, when a couple of years ago, as we recall, Dallas came in and absolutely swooped up CeeDee Lamb, because he was not supposed to go to Dallas. There was not supposed to be a wide receiver that was supposed to go there when they already had Cooper. They had Gallup at the time. And now you see that two of those wide receivers are gone. Things looked poor. Dak Prescott went 14 for 29, 134 yards with 1 interception. Zeke Elliott was an absolute disaster, 10 carries for 52 yards. Tony Pollard was really non-existent, 6 carries for 8 yards. The receptions were absolutely terrible. But then again, how much do we say to ourselves that, they're dealing with injuries left and right? We get it. But at the same time, though, is that, as you said, Mike, their expectations are so large that there should be no issues with this team and their depth. That's just the way I look at it. And
well, the problem with their depth as well is you're going to have to sacrifice parts of your teams because they paid so much for that offensive line. Yet it's either been injury prone or not as effective as they would have hoped. And I think the largest problem too with the offense is that they're expecting a lot from CeeDee Lamb. Early on, I get this is his third year in the NFL, and they're expecting him to be the number one team, and it's a lot to handle for that sort of franchise. That there's such huge expectations. I mean, we know it. We're in New York sports, and it's very similar with the Dallas Cowboys and that sort of environment and expectations around the team, and they're expecting CeeDee Lamb to be the number one wide receiver. And then what is it after that? With Gallup injured, it's, a combination of, what you would call wide receiver threes and whatnot. It's a stark downgrade from some of the names that you saw and the wide receiver core that you saw the last few years. And this is where Mike McCarthy, again, has to earn his stripes as a coach. And how you're going to scheme around this. I think it always seemed strange when he was brought in, given the fact that it looked like he was absolutely cooked in his time at Green Bay, and maybe time had passed by and it just wasn't working anymore, was becoming too predictable. And for Dallas, I mean, since his time coming over here, it's been okay for the most part. They've been a good team, but not as good, of course, as what Jerry Jones wants it to be and return it to the glory days, and it just hasn't been there. And we've mentioned it in the offseason, the specter of Sean Payton out there. And, if it doesn't happen, like I said earlier, if they don't get to the NFC Championship game, they try and lure Sean Payton, and I would be surprised if he wouldn't be the Dallas Cowboys coach by this time next year.
Yeah,
Yeah. And, I mean, defensively, it just looks...
They look decent. They look decent defensively. Or was it Tampa Bay struggling?
Maybe it was a bit of both. I think that there always seemed to be a little banged up earlier on in the year. When we talked with our good friend Evan Winter, it's always, the occasional, Mike Evans hamstring, Chris Godwin still recovering from the ACL.
He got hurt again. He got hurt, hamstring problem now.
Yeah, and Julio Jones, we never know how much we can expect with how injury-prone he's been in the last few years, although he had a pretty solid outing. Yes. And it always just seems like with Tom Brady teams that they're always kind of stuck in second gear for the first few years. It always was that way with Bill Belichick in New England, but it seems sometimes that translates over to Tampa Bay as well, which you always want to play your best as the year goes on, and once you get to the prime time, either way. But I think even on the Dallas sort of things, I think a lot of their defensive numbers, sort of got elevated last year, and in terms of carrying over to this year, and a little bit overhyped. I mean, Trayvon Diggs, you expected was going to have a bit of a drop off. Who's going to have another 11 interceptions this year? But even with all the interceptions, it kind of hid the fact that he was consistently getting burned in coverage every single time that, half the time they target him. So there was always going to be a little bit of a drop off there and with the defense. But I mean, boy, there's a lot of concern right now down there. And Mike McCarthy really better figure this out quick and not end of the season quick.
Yeah, absolutely. And since also week number 2 is upcoming in the next, or rather we are already in week number 2, which he's got to get things going pretty much really quick because now they're hosting the reigning AFC champion Cincinnati Bengals this upcoming weekend. So speaking of the Bengals, before we get to the Commanders, Cincinnati, they fell to Pittsburgh. They fell, Joe Burrow, four picks. T. Higgins got a concussion. Mike, my question to you is because, a lot of people probably might have thought, and I was one of them, was the Super Bowl run a fluke from last year?
Yeah, that's the exact thing I wrote down in my notes. Is this going to be a sophomore slump for Joe Burrow? And, it's really tough to say right now because, the Steelers, always a great coach defense and whatnot, but I think we do see. I think we'll probably see a little bit of a slump from Burrow. I don't think it's going to be interception prone like we saw there in 4 interceptions last week, but I think we'll have to temper our expectations from them just being, the really great team that they were last year and making that run to the Super Bowl. Not saying that they don't have the capability, but I believe they lost a couple of guys on that defense from last year. And, a lot of now everybody knows Joe Burrow as well, where last year, due to the injury 2 years ago, not really everybody had seen him in the league yet and whatnot. So I think there's going to be an adjustment period. Now, people know who Joe Burrow is. People know what the Cincinnati Bengals are like. They saw the great run last year, and coaches and leagues always catch up a little bit and vice versa, how you adjust. So I think there's going to be a little bit of that period. I think, I don't know if I want to say it's a slump. That all was a fluke just yet, and it's going to be a sophomore slump. It was just week 1, but the signs are just not looking good at all.
And you know what, though? For me, I feel like it's a tiny bit, and keyword is tiny bit early, to say that, just because when you look at some of what the problems were for Cincinnati a season ago, it was the offensive line. That was an absolute disaster going into really the season. Was how is Joe Burrow going to hold up after he tore his ACL back in the 2020 season? That was his freshman campaign. And then last year things looked good. And now, things are a little bit off. Again, exactly what you said. You have to temper expectations. I think a lot of people were so high on what this Bengals team can do. Now, granted, what we have seen with their head coach and Zach Taylor, it looked good. It looked really good last year. I personally thought they were going to win the Super Bowl the way that they were playing towards the end. They were unstoppable towards the end. And again, it just, they simply could not get it done. They just by taking a peek here and seeing the defense, the defense, Trey Hendrickson was another massive player who we spoke about a ton last year. We also spoke about Eli Apple, who actually, Giants legend Eli Apple, who played fantastically down the stretch. Granted, he did get burned by his former teammate and Odell Beckham Jr. in the Super Bowl. But again, what we got a chance to see last year, I don't know if we can see again this year. And also, too, we do remember there were times when their freshman kicker, Evan McPherson, was an absolute fierce player, no pun intended. He really was phenomenal last year. I don't expect that to happen again. But
He's
the
Steelers 5-yarder, Joey. He's going to be, if Cincinnati's going to have issues, it's not going to be because of their kicker. I'm
aware of that. But all I'm saying is that everything from top to bottom, expectations have to be tempered.
Yeah.
Everything from top to bottom. The next thing here that I've got in terms of my top 5 things. Well, before I get to my thing, Mike, for you, what are your what are your headlines in terms of what you got to witness in week 1?
Well, my first one, I'll start off with the season opener, and that, frankly, the Buffalo Bills are as legit as we thought they were going to be in the preseason and whatnot. I mean, they just showed on Primetime against the defending Super Bowl champions. They are absolutely and should be considered the favorites to win the Lombardi Trophy this year. They look like they're firing on all cylinders. Josh Allen looked absolutely fantastic. Singletary had a pretty good game as well. You had Gabriel Davis seeming to emerge as this great, wide receiver number 2 threat. It's a fantastic deep threat for Josh Allen, continuing what he was showing in last year's playoffs, which would be absolutely huge for Buffalo to have another great weapon around Trayvon Diggs. And then, I mean, that pass rush, you just can't get over that pass rush. You were talking about it last week. And, the addition of Von Miller, having that guy, we talked about before, and that guy on the defense that everybody has to worry about, create opportunities and whatnot, and just that impressive secondary as well, that impressive defensive group all around. They have all the tools that they need in order to win the Super Bowl this year, and they just had as good of a week 1 as anybody could have had.
And the best part about that too, Mike, is that they were missing their cornerback number 1 too, and Tre'Davious White. They were missing him. They still had Jordan Poyer over there in the backfield, or in the secondary rather. They also had still obviously Micah Hyde back there as one of the safeties too. Things looked really, really good. But for the Rams, though, they're still missing. They're still missing some pieces now, and we were talking about that too, because they've got another crucial game against Atlanta. Now, obviously, Atlanta is no Buffalo, but there were a lot of issues that were exposed by Buffalo for this LA Rams team, and we'll obviously get to talk about that next week. But I can name a whole ton now. We already named last week, but the Rams are a team that a lot of folks have to watch out for. And I don't think that they have what it takes to get back to the Super Bowl. I really don't. And that's going to be my bold prediction right now. And which is why also when you look back at our Super Bowl picks, both you and I chose Buffalo over obviously Tampa Bay and San Francisco respectively. But the Rams, they have a lot of work to do, Mike. They've got a lot of work to do, and I can see. And I think, again, Atlanta will try and expose every single thing that Buffalo did. And I don't think they're going to do it to as best of the ability that Buffalo is able to do. But if they can't figure things out, there could be some problems out in LA. They might, and when I say I'm not going to say problems, like they'll make it back to the playoffs, obviously, but there needs to be some fixing on the offensive line. Andrew Whitworth retired. That's a big loss. One of the best left tackles in the league is gone, and that now hurts the blind side of Matthew Stafford. Don't get me wrong.
Where's Allen Robinson?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's another thing too, is that, but that at least with Allen Robinson, you can begin to gradually fix, because that is just a chemistry thing, I believe. And you heard it too from Matthew Stafford, and you heard it from the entire team was that, yeah, it was a matchup issue, where that's why he didn't get a lot of looks. He didn't get a lot of targets. He didn't really get anything. Granted, if we see it happen again, then some questions will arise, and I can't wait to read up on our friend Cam De Silva and see what he's got there with the Rams Wire from USA Today. Mike, what else you got with your top headlines from last week?
Yeah, I mean, we went through already with Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals, and of course the Giants as well. One thing I'll go on next is what is going on with the AFC South Division. I mean, my goodness, I don't believe that they. I think they're the only division that was completely winless.
They were
this week. And of course, the Colts and the Texans played each other and played out to a 20-20 tie. I mean, the Titans, of course, losing on a missed field goal to the Giants, which, for a team and the expectations they have of winning the division, going back to the playoffs and all, that's a really bad loss at home in week 1. And then, of course, the Jaguars losing to the Commanders, which, again, another disappointing year. Who knows where this team is going with Trevor Lawrence and whatnot. It just, there's so many questions around Jacksonville. I mean, good God, this AFC South Division, an absolute mess. And the two teams that we expected to sort of rise to the proverbial cream of the crop in that mediocre division, in the Colts and the Titans, I mean, they just really didn't live up to that. Just a lot of bad signs from them, and the coach just don't seem to have that edge. Whether it's we want to give credit to Houston and trying to be competitive and trying to take the next step and whatnot in the rebuild and being a lot more competitive than last year, or simply the Colts in these close games and whatnot, just not having the edge. The defense needs to make that one play or whatnot. They missed. They had a lot of issues with kicking. They got rid of Rodrigo Blankenship. They missed a couple of potential game winners and whatnot. So you had a lot of special teams errors that really cost them. Week 1. So that division is just, as a whole, is just an absolute mess.
Oh yeah.
And then the other thing, I'll maybe stick Mike Tomlin in there as well, but I just want to give Pete Carroll a shout out. I mean, what a fantastic coach that he is. We've said it before, and I think Monday displayed it perfectly once again how good of a coach he is. Too many teams in the NFL, you always see that they're not having the franchise quarterback anymore. The quarterback that they drafted in the lottery and whatnot, it's not working out, or it's been traded. Like in the case of Seattle, and now it's these middling journeymen or mediocre guys who didn't work out here and didn't work out there. Oh well, they're going to be a lottery team already. It's that this and that, all that sort of stuff. And these sort of coaches, Mike Tomlin, Pete Carroll, and all show just how hard it is to win in the NFL and consistently create a competitive product. You thought the old gunslinger and Russell Wilson coming back, for his homecoming and all, leading, his new young buck team and all, going to be this playoff hunt campaign or whatever. Pete Carroll said, no, it's not going to be that easy coming in here. And they won a game with Geno Smith behind center. I mean, good God, Geno Smith.
Giants legend Geno Smith, yes.
There you go. So it's just so impressive how well he coached there. And conversely, some of the rookie head coaching errors there from Denver.
Yeah. Now, week number two. These are my headlines, which really, Mike, is just, it's unfortunate that we're going down this road. We are going down the road of the big W. And for those that do not understand what this W is, that is the W from Wario, from Mario. Because I have zero respect for the Washington Commanders because I hate the name. And I think the Washington football team sounded better. I really do. I think the Washington football team sounded better. So now when we discuss the Commanders, it will be the Warriors. That's exactly where we're going to go down. So with that being said, I personally believe, can Carson Wentz replicate his performance from last week against the Detroit Lions? I don't believe so. Last week, Mike, we got a chance to see what Wentz was able to do. He had 313 yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 picks against a brutal Jacksonville team. But the Detroit Lions last week looked fantastic for the most part throughout the entire game, and then they put it on in the fourth quarter. Can the Commanders, or the Warriors, as I say, can they potentially, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but upset Detroit? They're no longer an easy out, the Lions.
Yeah, I mean, the Lions just they looked really good even in a loss. DeAndre Swift, whether he's going to be healthy this week or whatnot, we'll see. But they have a really good running back tandem in Swift and Jamal Williams.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's the offense just looked really good overall. Dan Campbell and sort of the energy that he brings and all, it looks like there's something that you can work with there defensively. Certainly the talent over time certainly has to be upgraded and improved, but I mean there's something to build around there. I think for the Commanders, I think what I really liked seeing Curtis Samuel looked really good.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I think the San Francisco 49ers need to sue for copyright as Curtis Samuel was doing his best Deebo Samuel impression with 55 yards in the air with the touchdown and then the 17 rushing yards. So
yeah,
an interesting weapon there, and of course Scary Terry doing his thing.
And Jahan Dotson, too. Jahan Dotson looked great, too. Penn State's very own Jahan Dotson.
Yeah,
he looked great, too, Mike.
They have a really good they have a really interesting wide receiver core that we'll see. It really all determines on the play of Carson Wentz, which has really seemed like the theme for the Commanders in the last few years. These journeyman sort of quarterbacks, backup guys, and whatnot. And a lot of the team's success is going to really depend on their quarterback play. And so what can they get out of Wentz is really going to resemble where this team is going to go. But they have some interesting weapons. And even on the rushing side of things, when you scheme things well and get things going, Antonio Gibson is not a bad weapon at all.
Now, something else, too, just for the lack of time, we do have about 2.5 more minutes in our segment here. This one really concerns me, and I know it concerns our good friend Al Carroll as well very much. Matt Patricia calling offensive plays for the New England Patriots. Now, Mike, they looked bad. They looked bad down in Miami, like really bad. This is a team that is supposed to be on the rise. This is a team that after COVID, they did lose a bunch of guys due to opting out. Then last year, they looked really good in the regular season. They got absolutely walloped by Buffalo in the wild card game. But this team is, I can't believe I'm talking about the Patriots being on the rise, but they are because they've always been up top. But now they lose Tom Brady. They got Mac Jones. They're back on the rise. But with the way we saw, with what we saw against Miami, do we see a duplicate performance from this offense? With Matt Patricia calling the plays. And if we do see it, how long is the leash on him?
It looked really bad. I don't think the leash is going to be that long. You know how Bill Belichick wants to coach his teams, the expectations and whatnot, the culture that's been built, Tom Brady there or not at this point. I don't know how long of a leash he's going to have. Like you said, it looked god awful. I mean, it's like me, who was a defender playing soccer, trying to play the number 9 striker. I mean, what are you doing? Like a defensive guy, his entire career. Oh yeah, let's call some offensive plays. Does the guy even know what a wide receiver short slant is or whatever short slant route? Does he even know the route names? Probably. I mean, is it really going to pick up? Are we going to see a repeat? Absolutely. I mean, look what the Steelers did. Just held down Cincinnati and played out a really entertaining contest there. You think they can't do that against the Patriots? Absolutely. TJ Watt or not, they have a pretty solid secondary built around Minkah Fitzpatrick. And I think the Patriots are going to be just as bad again this week. It's just not looking good whatsoever.
Well, let's keep rolling on here, and since again for the lack of time, Mike, I wanted to continue on with our week 2 headlines, but with that being said, let's keep the ball rolling here. We've got to make our picks. Let us give you the week number 1 standings. Not only the standings, but also the results. First, we will go with the results. So we look here, and something that our good friend Ian Schraier kept telling me, you, Rob DeLuca, kept saying over and over again, yeah, that Baltimore Jets game, that's a trap. Well, Ian, I got to tell you, that it sounds pretty bad. And, and oddly enough, Ian lost last week. You look, he chose the true trap, which was the tie, Indianapolis and Houston. And Casey Bryant, LP, Larry Patakowicz, and John DeConnie all fell for that trap. I mean, listen, it's not ideal. And for those that don't know, I have sacrificed myself from the Primetime Rundown team. I have now joined the enemy in the Essential Wrestling Podcast. So on my own show, I'm not even on my own team. So Mike Szabo and Ian Schraier are leading the way in terms of, or the captains, if you will, since the Primetime Rundown is also their show. But Rob DeLuca, Mike Szabo, and our good friend Evan Winter are 1-0. And Mike, going back to the standings here one more time, Evan took the Chargers over the Raiders. Talk about a bold pick to go that route. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I mean, Evan so far coming into the league, I mean, my goodness, he's bold, really going for it. I love it. But it's really refreshing seeing that energy. Such bold picks and so early on out of the gate.
And I think what's crazy is that I couldn't carry us last year, but it looks like now that we are starting from scratch, and I'll be carrying the Essential Wrestling Podcast, guys. So let's go EWP and boo to the Primetime Rundown. That's right. That is the motto that we're going with. Mike, your pick for this for week number 2. Who do you got?
I feel like I should go very bold, and since I just hyped them up so much, and go with the Pittsburgh Steelers over the New England Patriots.
Wow.
That is.
Are you keeping it?
Are we locking it in? That's tough. Let's make this, put a 30-second clock on me.
Yeah, right. We could do the hair. Here, we'll give that for. All right, all the way down there. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, I almost feel obligated given the fact that I said the Patriots are going to look so god awful again, but and especially Pittsburgh is home as well. So you know what? Life is short. Why not? Let's go bold.
All right, so your pick will be the Pittsburgh Steelers over the New England Patriots. That is a bold pick, no doubt about it. My pick is pretty much the same routine as what we have seen. The Cleveland Browns and Patriots legend Jacoby Brissett will make the New York Jets look silly once again. And the reason why we go down that route is because of what we have seen with Joe Flacco. It was a legitimate disaster. Bring in Mike White. You heard the chants, Mike White, Mike White. That's what you wanted. The Jets fans wanted him against the Ravens last weekend. It simply did not happen. Things did not look good with the Jets. And now you've got Robert Saleh telling the media that I've got receipts. These are things that you simply don't say after week 1. You don't do that. I think things are on a little bit of a downfall once again, or they're pretty much staying down and below the street level. for the New York Jets. So they will fall to the Cleveland Browns this weekend, and that is who I will be picking in this week's Survivor Pool. Mike, let's keep on rolling here. Let's go to Major League Baseball. The New York Yankees and Aaron Judge, 57 home runs. He's well on his way to 73. Will he get there? I don't know. Chances are very good he will be breaking the Roger Maris's record of 61. But also something else too is that this New York Yankees team, they all of a sudden have revitalized, and now they've won 4 straight. They're 6.5 games up over the Tampa Bay Rays. And now it's almost like another jolt of life here down the stretch. And now what we're hearing too from some reports is that Harrison Bader most likely will be in Yankee Stadium come Tuesday night, ready to play. Luis Severino will be ready on Wednesday against Pittsburgh. That's a big deal. The Yankees are about to be taking on the Milwaukee Brewers out in Milwaukee in about 20 minutes or so. This team is on an upswing here, and Milwaukee is extremely desperate. If the Yankees can continue going on here, they could potentially be a team to watch out for. Are they World Series worthy yet? I don't think so. But this is a team that is back to being on the rise.
Yeah, I think this is exactly what the doctor ordered after all the mediocrity that we've been seeing and talking about for almost the last 2 months. And now finally they're starting to pick it up once again, and injuries have really hit them as well. It's been a problem for the lineup. You think about some of the regulars over the last month that have fell. Anthony Rizzo really being babied with the back injury, and then now it's the injured list and the headaches as a result of the epidural injection and whatnot. Benintendi, having the bone issue in his wrist, snapping in the swing. Carpenter way back when, LeMahieu, which is mind-boggling to me that he was playing with practically a broken toe or something like that for a month or so throughout the first half of the summertime, and now, of course, that's resulted with him on the injured list. But yet they've won 8 out of their last 10, and the talent around Aaron Judge has continued to do what he's been doing all season, which feel like we've seemed to almost take for granted. We've seen it so consistently enough this season. But I mean, just to highlight him for 1 second, I think for most Yankee fans my age or around your age, Joey, I think probably the greatest individual season that you've seen probably in our lifetime was probably, steroids or not, 2007 Alex Rodriguez. And Aaron Judge is doing this without the specter of steroids and having, one of the best offensive seasons for an individual player in the last 20, maybe almost 25 years in baseball. I would be shocked he doesn't hit the record. I think he's probably going to hit 63, 64 home runs when all is said and done in the regular season. He is just making absolute history. It is fantastic to watch, and we should never, ever take for granted the season that we're watching, no matter the career that he goes on to have, hopefully in pinstripes. And around him, the talent is starting to pick up once again. IKF, to start out with him first. We've gone through ups and downs with him, and there's been a lot of talk in terms of the lackluster hitting, the label that's been put on him as the singles hitter, and the mediocre defense at shortstop. Well, we talked about it last week, how he should be moved to third. I don't get what's the resistance over it, not playing Peraza, et cetera, et cetera. But his bat has started to pick up again. He's hitting 350 in the month of September. And as much as people really, criticize his offense and all, he's been outside of Judge, of course, he's been the Yankees' best performer with runners in scoring position this season. He hits when you need it the most. And yeah, he's a ground ball hitter or whatever, but he's getting the hits when you need it the most, and he's starting to heat up again. Gleyber Torres is the biggest one. He's looked a lot better in the last 2 weeks. His swings look a lot better. If he can get back to being, himself that he was in the first half, where he was almost a borderline all-star candidate. it really just improves this lineup massively, really lengthens out this lineup. And I think it was on Talkin' Yance, that podcast. I think they had Ian Happ on, and they sort of brought up Gleyber Torres and how he's really just been bogged down and in his head after the trade rumors that were made at the deadline. The Yankees seemed to, or not even the Yankees, but teams were calling on Torres. There was, of course, the rumor of a failed trade with Miami for their starter Pablo Lopez, whether or not Gleyber Torres was involved in some sort of those talks or whatever. But I mean, just to even just go off of what they were saying, it was absolutely true. And Gleyber Torres, how active he is on social media and whatnot, I'm sure he wasn't immune to hearing these things, and maybe it really did affect him over this last month and a half or so, where he was just absolutely poor. But it seems like maybe he's starting to come out of that. And if you see the first half Gleyber Torres throughout the rest of the way and into October, boy, that's huge for the Yankees.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think really seeing a majority of the team just continue to traject upward is absolutely massive for this Yankees team and really their playoff hopes, because in my opinion, I thought that they were going to be a one and done. They'll get the bye. They'll be the probable 2 seed in the American League, and whoever would be playing them, one of the winners out of the wild card, would be just absolutely running through them at Yankee Stadium. I wouldn't expect anything less at that point, but now things are changing. Now the Yankees are getting a tiny bit healthier. Can this team kind of turn the tide around a bit? Can they get healthy, but can they also perform and stay healthy at the same time? That is going to be, I think, the biggest key. And now we're seeing with Harrison Bader coming back too, we know about his defense. We're not so sure about his offense. And again, we know what he's capable of in center field. So we'll see what the deal is there. I'm still concerned though about the pitching in this playoff in the playoffs. If they can get things together, Mike Garrett Cole was paid as an ace. I don't know if he can get things done in the playoffs as an ace. We saw it last year against Boston. He was an absolute atrocity up in Fenway. It was over in the wild card game. And I get that he's had really bad numbers in Boston, like historically bad numbers in Boston, granted. But then again, there are times when he has 14 strikeouts against Minnesota. Or there are times when he'll have he'll blame it on something else. And Luis Severino is just waiting in the wings, ready to go. But we remember what he did back in the wild card game back in 2017 against Minnesota, gave up 8 runs in the first inning. A disaster. Granted, they did come back and win the game, but still, there's a lot of question marks for this team, especially on the pitching side too. And Frankie Montas too, I'm not bought in on him 100% yet.
Yeah, Montas he's really hasn't lived up to a lot of things since being traded over. I don't think anybody was expecting a true ace when trading for Montas. I think that was absolutely unreasonable to expect. Maybe you were hoping for a good number 2. He's probably closer to a good number 3, which I don't know how much you love the deal then if that's going to be the case. But he, again, like, this is the risk. He's never been on this stage. So once you get toward the tail end of the regular season into the playoffs and whatnot, he's never been in this stage. Garrett Cole, listen, there's a lot of things about him we could go on for a while. It's which version of him you're going to see. He was fantastic in the shortened season, postseason, no crowd and whatnot. He was fantastic in that 2020 and the unfortunate one and done exit. He was absolutely the ace that the Yankees were looking for. In 2021, it was Fenway Park. For whatever reason, the man is not able to pitch in Fenway Park, and that extends past the Yankee uniform. Even when he was, ungodly, absolutely unhittable Houston Astros Garrett Cole, for whatever reason, there was some hijinks on him at Fenway Park, and of course, then the Pittsburgh Pirates days too, and the limited numbers there. So whatever reason, there's some voodoo on him at Fenway or whatever. I don't think we'll ever truly know the answer on Garrett Cole. Can he be this $36 million ace? Can he pitch these big games and whatnot until we see it? Ever since he got shelled against Seattle in Yankee Stadium in the beginning of August, he's been absolute money for the most part, except for the Fenway start that we've recently seen. Right. Otherwise, he's been really strong. So it's really just what version of him you're going to see. You want to see more of the 13, 14 strikeouts that we've recently seen, the great performance that you mentioned that he recently had on the Twins. I think he can be that. I personally do believe in Garrett Cole, and I think especially numbers 2 against Yankee Stadium. No matter what, he's going to be the game 1 starter, and I think you could be fairly confident enough that I think he'll deliver a good start. But I do understand the concerns.
So you look at and you say to yourself about the New York Mets, who have concerns of their own, Mike. And right now, with what the Mets have come in with, they've only won. They're 5-5 in their last 10. They've won 1 game. They're playing Pittsburgh right now. They're up on them. But Atlanta, awfully close, right? The defending World Series champions, right behind them, just a game back. And they're struggling a little bit too, but they're playing Philadelphia. So I think this Mets team, they are really, really rooting on this Phillies team. Crazy enough to say.
Yeah, I mean they just need a break to just get some breathing room here, and really I think the biggest thing with the Mets you've seen is really their offense struggling. A little bit. The pitching has been a big problem. Yeah, DeGrom got his 10 strikeouts, but it wasn't a pretty performance against a lowly Cubs team, and getting swept against Chicago for a team that the Mets want to be and where they're at in this stage of the season. I mean, that's absolutely inexcusable. They really need to start picking up, just find one last jolt of life to just finish off this season, finish off this division, and get to the real season, and that's the postseason, which I think they're absolutely geared up for. I think the biggest problem with them that we're going to talk about, depending how their season goes, is how they skimped on the DH position at the trade deadline, and it worked for a time in the first week or two with Darren Ruff and Daniel Vogelbach, and he became a cult hero and all that sort of stuff. But it's been bad for the last month. It showed these guys are platoon hitters for a reason, and secondary depth guys for a reason. That the Mets thought they were clever going this interesting route with skimping on the position. It hasn't worked, and who knows, it could come back to haunt them.
Well, there's another team that's actually out in Los Angeles right now that I've got to ask our good friend DB this, because in addition to, well, first off, DB, hello, and it has been such a long time since we've seen you, so welcome back, my friend. How are things out in LA before we get to the Dodger question for you, that impromptu Dodger question?
Double J, Mike, it's great to be back with you. Things are great. The summer was welcome. The break was great. We did the Cup final. We did the draft in Montreal. And the first 2 weeks of August was great for a rest. And then about the middle of August, I said, let's go on board. So I'm ready for the season to start. So, and yes, you could ask me a Dodger question, but I was born in the Bronx. I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Yankee fan. But let's have at it. What's your Dodger question?
Well, I think the thing is that we know that the Dodgers, though, they're 98 and 44. They've locked up the NL West, but I think, and this will make Mike laugh, but there's a guy, Mike, that we were talking about pitching and everything like that. There's a guy that's on the Dodgers, Yankees legend Andrew Heaney. That the Dodgers, I tell you, hey, listen, I don't know. In all honesty, though, obviously he's not going to be the savior, but. Right. Do the Dodgers have what it takes to get back to the World Series? Do they have what it say? Will they falter? In the division, in the NLDS and the NLCS. What do you see with them, DB?
Well, Double J, I don't think they'll lose in the divisional round, because a couple of things. Heaney's going to be a bullpen option, because you're going to have Urias, Anderson, and I guess Gosselin, and and maybe Dustin May. So the pitching in lines. I watch this team every night. This family season ticket holders. My wife's a huge Dodger fan, so she makes me watch the Dodgers every night at 7:30 local. You look at the top four of that lineup: Mookie, Trey, Freddie, and Will Smith. That's tough. That's where the strength of this team lies. Because when you look at the bottom of the order, look, Bellinger's making some inroads. Max Muncy's still trying to recover from that elbow injury he had last season, which really hurt them in the postseason. Yep. So, they should get now. But the Mets, look, if the Mets are going to throw, Max, Jake, and Bassett at them, that's going to be a tough team to beat. Now, they're going to have more offense than they have now, and there's some guys that are really MIA right now. But the Mets-Dodgers would be intriguing for me. Could the Dodgers go? Absolutely. Could they win it all? Without question. This team is a machine. And I think just Freeman, if you watch what Freddie's done the last couple of weeks, he's gotten to the conversation about the batting title. He's ruining, Goldschmidt's Triple Crown year. This is a dangerous, team, but I think it's the pitching. Because is anybody afraid of the names that I mentioned at the rotation? So I think that, and Craig Kimbrell, he's been great lately, but you look at his numbers, they're kind of ugly. Yeah. But when you're 50 games over 500, the games don't matter, guys. The games haven't mattered since, I think, June, when there was a 1-game lead between the Dodgers and Padres. Dodgers went and spanked them, and they took off, and now it's a 20-game lead. So whatever you want to project off their numbers here going down the stretch, you can't do it. This is a solid team that's been there, that's certainly equipped in every facet. If a guy like Blake Treinen comes back and he's been having a lot of injuries, I think the back end of the bullpen you might worry about, but they should easily get to the division. But then, given the strength of the Mets pitching, I still think it's a toss-up.
Look at that little prediction there from our good friend DB across the way. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's of course properly introduce our good friend DB. We have not seen, ladies and gentlemen, Dennis Bernstein, one of the co-hosts of the fourth period, the Hot Stove on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio Channel 91, the Hot Stove powered by the fourth period. So, DB, let's get into it. Of course, hockey's back. You're down in El Segundo all the time going to see the LA Kings. And, there's obviously a ton to talk about with the Kings, but we'll wait a little bit on that just because, we'll talk about a little bit of the competition that LA faces this year. Sure. And it seems almost like the Pacific Division has gotten a little bit better. You look at Calgary. We had on Eric Francis during the summer, and we kind of interrupted his summer up at the cottage. He wasn't too happy about that, but he, all was said and done there. Seattle got a little bit better. Edmonton finally shored up their goaltending situation, which was a nice thing. Anaheim is still in a rebuild. Vancouver, I don't know where they are, but they locked up JT Miller. Plenty of questions on defense. Vegas, they've got a lot of goaltender issues. Who knows what it's going to be? Who's going to be back there? DB, I got to start with Calgary with you, just to see what's happened throughout the summer. And obviously the Islanders out here, they don't have Kadri. Everyone thought, and all of the insiders thought that John Shannon, for one, had him locked up on Long Island. That didn't happen. And now you've got Kadri, you've got Huberdeau, you've got Mackenzie Weegar, who's out there. And the latter most likely going to be signing an extension at some point with Tkachuk out now in Florida and Gaudreau now in Columbus. This team, did they get better or are they the same as last year?
Well, I don't think anybody had a better summer than Brad Treliving, right? Because he had to do that, right? Johnny walked. Matthew Tkachuk was not going to be a long-term player in Calgary. And so at the 11th hour, looks what he's done. They're different, JJ. I'm not sure they're better. I think they'll be about the same because they'll be more dangerous with Kadri and the grit that he brings and the feistiness replaces what Tkachuk had, right? Huberdeau and Johnny Gaudreau, that's probably a push with respect to production. But what Kadri does, it makes them more dangerous down the middle because you traded Sean Monahan away to Montreal. You got to pick for him, whatever. Who cares? Doesn't really matter. But then you go Lindholm, Kadri, Backlund down the middle. That could be a championship, the center ice position with respect to its depth chart. I'm not sure they're going to be a lot better than last season because they had a perfect season last year. They really had. And here's the thing. I know Kadri makes them better, and they'll probably sign Uyghur, and he's a really nice add. That's a great trade for them. But when they lost last season to Edmonton, the same thing happened to one player in the playoffs for 2 consecutive seasons, and that's the goaltender, Jacob Markstrom. He wore down. He was not the same player. Now, they were talking about him for the Vezina, halfway through the season, and I think he's one of the primary reasons that Calgary lost in the postseason to Edmonton. And that's with Mike Smith in goal and the other net. He just wears down. He plays too much. And that's the one thing about Daryl Sutter. He rides his goalies. And I don't think if Jacob Markstrom is going to play 60, 58, 62 games, then you got to check out and see what he's going to do in the postseason. So, yes, this is a very dangerous team. They have enough depth to go to the Cup final. But, they got to have better goaltending, number one. Number two, they got to figure out the way to stop the Connor and Leon, which they'll probably face again in the playoffs. So I think just a dangerous team too. I think they're 115 point team. Now, I think what's going to happen, guys, is that the top of the division may not be, 115, 117 points. But the bottom, you mentioned Seattle, adding Shane Wright to the mix with Manny Beniers and Yanni Gordon middle. They have a solid depth chart in the middle. Anaheim, look, you're going to be entertained by Zegras and probably McTavish this season, but not much more. That's a rebuild right there. The San Jose, bless Mike Greer taking on that job because that's a huge undertaking. It's an older roster. It's beat up. Finally, they solved the issue with Evander Kane today, which is a good thing for them. They can move on from that. But this is going to be a competitive division. And the one thing in Vancouver, you got to watch out. Yeah, they gave JT Miller money. I have no problem with it. But what does that mean for Bo Horvat? I think that's the one guy you're going to look at that could be on the move because I'm not sure they're in a position to pay Bo, if they're going to pay Brock Besser, if they're going to pay Elias Pettersson. So it's going to be a very interesting division. But when I handicap this division, I think it lays up for the first 4 teams the way it did last season. So I think it's Calgary, Edmonton, LA, Vegas, Vancouver, although I don't know about Vegas, guys. I just don't know. Any one of those goals. Look, I was never a big Robin Leonard fan, and people know that. And that's an on ice. I applaud him for all the stuff he's done to promote what people can do to help people with mental health issues. But he's not a championship goalie to me. I think he's 12-12 in the playoffs. He's not a guy that's going to win you a cup. Never thought he was. But the replacements, and you trade away Pacioretty for nothing, it's a mess. But that's a team that if Jack Eichel raises up and gets 100 points, they still have depth. They still have quality. So a very interesting division, I'd say right now in the moment because of the depth down the middle and adding Kadri at the, unexpectedly. The Calgary are my favorite to win the division.
DB, it's wild to see with Vegas because I think we've said this, and I think we've said this with you before, is that I couldn't stand, and I think I've said this to you personally as well, is that I could not stand what Vegas had started to do, where they traded away Nate Schmidt, they brought in Pietrangelo, and you heard from a few players there too, and I'm sure you can vouch for this too, was that they were kind of turned off by the continuous, they sign these big contracts and then they're shipped away because they found someone better. I don't want to say it's almost like karma is coming back to bite Bill Foley and the entire Vegas, the Vegas team in the butt, but it's, when you look at all of this stuff here, it's almost like quite possibly the chickens have come home to roost here where, now they're beginning to kind of, don't get me wrong, they have a fantastic roster, but they've got those injuries where, one injury might exactly make or break their season. You look and you saw they made the trade for Aiden Hill, who I don't know, are you going to expect maybe he might be the number 2? Logan Thompson would be the number 1. Like there's a lot of question marks there in Sin City.
Yeah, well, I think, JJ, to talk about the top of the food chain, it's the shiny toy theory. Every offseason, they made a big splash. And that's because the owner is very visible. He's in the locker room after games. And I get it. He owns a team. And look, the first year skewed everything. Right? There was going to be a pattern of building this team. And then they got to the Cup final. So you throw that one plan and throws out the window. Now we're going to go be aggressive. And look, the fans love when they were aggressive. And then when it didn't pay off and they didn't perform in the playoffs, it's fine. So, there are grumblings about how players are treated there. Yeah. But you know what? There's a salary cap, and everybody can't play in New York or Los Angeles, so you got to go play there, and they still have a formidable roster. It's an older roster. It's right now the window's about to close, but I can't think that Mark Stone when he signed, and I love that player, a heart and soul guy. I don't think he signed up for the fact that Max Pacioretty's now he's on the sidelines now with an torn Achilles, that he was going to Carolina. I don't think that when he lines up, and no disrespect to Chandler Stevenson, who's probably going to be the de facto left winger on that line, he didn't sign up for that. So I think that there's a question of chemistry. I do think they'll be better with Bruce Cassidy. I think certainly they'll be a different type of team. They have a shot at making the playoffs, but yeah, you look at that goaltending depth, and I'm like, okay, they do like Logan Thompson, and maybe he is the guy, but he was undrafted, right? So I don't really know. I think there are huge changes in Vegas if they don't get to, let's say, the final of the season, because I think this is it for McPhee and McCrimmon, because they've made mistakes. You can call them mistakes, but is the team better than Calgary or Edmonton, or you go to the Central, Colorado, St. Louis? No, they're a packed team, and I wouldn't be shocked if they didn't make the playoffs. But to say that with this team, with all the moves they made and big time moves, to miss the playoffs in consecutive seasons, I don't know how that's going to. I don't see how that would sit well with Foley. I think there'll be new management in that team, so they're under the gun from an on ice and certainly from a management position in Vegas this season.
Mike, take it away.
Yeah, DB, you talked about goalies, and let's talk about Edmonton for a second. And they went to the conference final with not the best of goalies in Mike Smith, and they finally get one in Jack Campbell, and yet, I mean, what's the expectation would you see really in Edmonton, and how much farther could they go? Is this going to be what can take McDavid and Draisaitl all the way? Is this enough?
Well, here's a caveat. Jack played here in Los Angeles. He's a great guy. All his teammates love him. He is one of the nicest, most lovable players in the league. But he hasn't went around, has he, in the playoffs? I don't think, because he played in Toronto and they don't get out of the first round. So, Mike, here's what it does, though. You will not see that soul-sucking goal that Mike Smith gives up from center ice in the playoffs. Like, I was in the building in Edmonton when that puck went in the net from center ice. And that's not going to happen because you don't know what you're going to get from Jack Campbell. I think if you have a decent defensive effort in front, you're not going to give up those pivotal goals at the wrong time where the guy's out of position or flopping around. So I think from a mental standpoint, a mental approach, I think they'll be more secure if they were going into, say, to a divisional series against Calgary again. I think they feel better about their goaltending with Jack Campbell in that. That said, Jack hasn't done anything in the playoffs that would warrant saying, okay, is he better than Mike Smith? When you're in the building and you see the puck go in from center ice, and you see Edmonton, there was no louder building in the playoffs than in Edmonton. When you feel and see the air get sucked out of the building when a guy gives up a goal like that, you just can't have that. And so I think that, Mike, is going in. They'll say, okay, we know, like, yeah, Mike Smith get hot, but when he's bad, he's going to lose you a series. I don't think. Let's put it this way. Coming in the season, I assume Edmonton's going to be in the playoffs. If they lose a series or they don't go to the Cup final, I don't think it'll be because of Jack Campbell. So because of that, I do think it's an improvement in net for the Oilers.
Yeah, and just going off of that as well, we talked about Calgary, we talked about some of this top line, and you know what? Let's talk about the Kings as well. This is a year they made the big trade for Kevin Fiala, and where is this team in terms of trying to take that next step and getting back to where they were earlier in the 2010s?
Well, the next step would be a divisional title, right? They had 99 points. Adding Kevin Fiala, who is an 80-point-a-game player, a dynamic player. And I know people kind of focus on goals, guys, but I look at Kevin Fiala and I see 53 or 51 assists last season. He's a playmaker.
Yes.
That trade, and I've said it publicly, I've been begging Rob Blake to make a trade like this for 3 years. Like, use some of your assets. Like, I don't know, like Brock Faber was supposed to come to Los Angeles and be here for 10 years and wear an A. Well, he probably didn't even want to play in Los Angeles because he wasn't signing. And the first round pick, who cares? Like, I'm not a prospects guru. I want every time you get the best player in the trade, you won the trade. And Kevin Fiala makes this a more dangerous team. Now, I'll say one thing. Victor Arvidsson had surgery on his back in June for a herniated disc, and I'm not sure he's going to start the season. So, yeah, adding Fiala to that top line And the key to adding Fiala to the top line, guys, is I mentioned his playmaking ability. If you look at the year that Adrian Kempe had, great goal scoring, but he had like 19 assists. He's not a good passer. Kevin Fiala can make plays, can make passes. I would have liked him to chase Johnny Gaudreau. People in LA think I'm nuts, but that's been a longstanding theory about me. But they needed that type of player. But here's the thing. Here's my question. Would teams like Colorado and let's say Florida and Tampa Bay, their core players. Their core 4 or 5. Right? Who's the core 4 or 5 in Los Angeles? It's still Kopitar, it's Doughty, maybe it's Quigg, it's Fiala. They don't have the elite talent that says, okay, they can go up against Colorado and win a series. They can't, not at this point. They're a better team. And not only that, their system was great, but they didn't get great goaltending. If you look at their statistics last year, guys, there's no way they were a 99-point team. They were +3 goal differential. I think they were like 20th in save percentage. Like their power play was awful, but they bought into their system that Todd McClellan came in. This was a system team. Right now, you add 85-point score. They won a lot of close games, guys. And what's going to happen with the goaltending? Cal Peterson was supposed to be the guy last year, and Jonathan Quick said, not so fast. He did a Lee Corso on him. It's not so fast. I'm the guy. And he started, I think, 50-some-odd games. He started all 7 games of the playoffs. And John now is, 36 years old. He's in the last year of his contract. What's going to happen here? So, Mike, I think they'll be in the conversation for the division. They are not yet an elite team because they need – first of all, here's the first guy at the top of the food chain. They need Quentin Byfield to score more than 5 goals in 40 games. They need progression from Arthur Kaliev, who had a great season for a rookie. I think he had, 16 goals? But he had 13 in the first half. He finished with 3 in his last 33 games. He was a non-factor in the playoffs, was a healthy scratch. They need the kids that they've talked about forever now to emerge. Because now it's not, is this going to work? No, you have a system in place. This team plays to it, their identity. They don't give up much. But now to get over the top, you need more offense from this team. I think they were 20th or 22nd in offense. That's never going to win you a title. So I think in the mix for the division, I think we're at least another year away from like a serious contender because they're probably going to have to add at least one more scorer. And I don't see that happening until next offseason.
So my next question for you, DB, sticking with the Kings here is that, obviously for you, and I know with our interview series, when you and I first met, something that really stuck out to me was, obviously you're able to go into the locker room, you're able to meet with these guys, and which I'll get to, that in a second, because now the NHL, you're allowed to go back into the room. Yep. You'll be able to talk with them. That's really good for you, especially since, you really talk with these guys and get to know them and whatnot. But with Dustin Brown retiring, and now could this be a second straight year of potentially Kings royalty, and most notably in Jonathan Quick? Is this his last year in LA?
Double J, I'm going to ask him that the first day of camp. I don't know. Does he look? There's nothing more to do for that player, right? He's won 2 cups. He won a Conn Smythe. He's paid. He's a low key guy, so I'm sure he's got more money in the bank than he'll ever need. I'm not sure. It depends. If he comes through this season healthy, and let's say they get to a conference final and lose, and get out of the division, then maybe he signs up for 1 year. I think it's also incumbent on how Cal Peterson plays.
Cal Peterson, yeah.
Right? Because Cal's getting $5 million this year. Like last year, he was on his entry level. Now he's getting $5 million. They want him to be the man, but they want him to be the man last year. It's intriguing because, Dustin, I know Dustin very well. Dustin didn't decide on hanging up until very late in the season. Right? He had a bad injury in San Jose. His finger got pulverized by a puck in San Jose, and I think just going through all the injuries that he's had over the 18-year career, so I've made my legacy. They're going to retire my jersey, and that may come down to Jonathan Quick as well. He may not make a decision in training camp. He may not make a decision by opening night. But if he goes through, let's say, an injury-racked season where he has a knee injury or a groin injury or hamstrings, and just maybe too much because the preparation for these seasons is what gets these guys. And again, with a guy who's set for life, who has established his legacy here, is not going to play for another team. It's very, very interesting. I think it's incumbent on Jonathan Quick's health and how Cal Peterson performs next season.
That's a big deal. Cannot wait to see what happens with the Kings, though. Should be tons of fun. But I do want to move over to Seattle for a second because they were able to pry away Oliver Bjorkstrand for a few draft picks, which a lot of teams I know out here on the East Coast were not too happy about. And I can tell you, I know a lot of fans I saw all over social media say, "Well, why couldn't we give up a couple of picks here? Why couldn't we get Oliver Bjorkstrand for a few?" And you know, for what Seattle was able to get for him, or what Seattle was able to give up for him was absolutely fantastic. They also got Andre Burakovsky as well in free agency. I mean, this is a team that slowly is on the rise, I guess. You know, do you see this team, you know, potentially making a big leap in the standings? Like, I don't know. What do you see there with Seattle?
Double J, I don't know if they need to make a big leap in the standings. They have to be way more entertaining. That was a boring ass team last year. Like they were just, and it's Haxtell. I know that's his system, and they were just so, but had no scoring. They weren't. I make it a point to watch almost every game or try to watch every game. I watch these games, sit through a first period. I'm like, wow, this is like the same. This is just terrible. So when they add the scoring, I think their progression will come again, like we touched on already, through center ice. Like, what's Matty Beniers going to be? Right? They have Yanni Gord, who's a solid, you know, Yanni Gord, again, 21, 27, 48 points. That's a solid season, right? Now they have Wenberg, who's probably going to play with Bjorkstrand, who's probably going to be on the third line. So I think how well that the center ice play fares in the division that has a lot of really good centers, I think that's, you know, that's number one. Number two, what kind of goaltender is Grubauer going to be?
Yeah.
Right. He started off poorly, got better in the regular season, and they were supposed to be tough to play against. But when you can't score, you're not that tough to play against. Right. At some point, you have to have offense. So I think that they'll be more exciting. And look, I was saying at the draft, like they have to find a way to get Shane Wright at 4. And nobody, no, there's no way, there's no way, there's no way. And of course, no way. He's 4. And so I think in the future with Beniers and with Gord and Shane Wright, fine. I don't think they're going to make a lot of noise. But they have to be at least more entertaining than last season because the honeymoon, and it's a great building. I was in the building a couple of times last season. Like that honeymoon's going to go last. And people, it's great that, and people love the hockey up there. But at some point, you're going to have to be, if you're not winning, you got to be more entertaining. So to me, I think job number one for Francis and the rest of the organization is to get a better, competitive, more entertaining product on the ice.
That's a big deal, especially when we do know that Dave Haxtell was an absolute dud where I am in Philadelphia. So it's going to be really tough. So a couple more questions for you, DB, and then Mike is going to do, since Rob DeLuca is not here with us tonight and has not been with us for a while. He also says hello to you, as does Ian. Of course. So my next question for you is Vancouver, because we saw obviously the trade that was made. Oliver Ekman-Larsson was supposed to be, you know, this big time guy that was come over from Arizona and was supposed to, you know, make everything better. Not the case whatsoever. And there were also rumors that I saw all over social media that that Vancouver might be potentially shopping him. That rumor died fast, but I mean, again, when you're paying this man $7.26 million, and I think there was a retained salary on that with maybe $1 million or whatever. That, as you brought up about with Bo Horvat, who's their team captain, now this kind of puts them in a little bit of a situation where they might not have room to sign other players, but they did re-sign JT Miller. Where do you see this team going? Because it almost seems like they're going down, up, but they should just consistently be up. But it's really very question marky, if you will.
Yeah, well, they missed the playoffs by 5 points. But they played way better with Bruce Boudreau. Whatever reason, it didn't work with Travis Green anymore. He moved on. Bruce came in, did a great job. So, yeah, I think they're going to trade Bo Horvat because Bo's unrestricted at the end of the season. He's an unrestricted free agent. He's making $5.5 million. I don't see, if you have to pay, you know, you're already paying Quinn. You're going to have to pay Elias Pettersson, right? Because he had 7-3. He's going to be restricted at the end of 2024. I think that's the move that you make because you've now said that this is JT Miller's team by giving them that money, right? So that's it. So I think that, and again, this is the opposite of Seattle. I think they're entertaining. I think they score a lot of goals. I question defense. You talk about OEL, Tyler Myers. Hey, look, he was a plus 15 last year. I know people rip on the guy, and I know plus or minus, people go nuts when I mention plus minus. This is a competitive team that I think can get in the postseason. If, let's say, in LA falls out, or maybe you don't have 5 teams make it from the Central Division. But I think it's a 1 and out. I just don't, and I like Tyler. I like Demko a lot. I just don't think there's enough quality there to say, okay, this is a team that's going to threaten. Let's say, if you think Calgary and Edmonton are at the top of the division, Double J, then this team is not prepared to beat one of those teams at this point.
See, that's tough, especially with the amount of money that they have tied into a lot of these players. And again, really the one that I look at is the OEL trade, when you've got him for another, let's see, 5 more years.
Long time.
Yeah, yep. Exactly. And that's going to be a really, really tough player to trade and he's on a no movement, I believe. So that's going to be tough as well. And how much also the cap goes up to in a certain amount of time to retains it, whatever it may be, going to be tough. DB, my last question for you, or actually my last 1.5 question before we get to Mike, and he'll close it out. The media now, and since we're all a part of the media, it must be really amazing for you, where 2 years have gone by and we have 2.5 years have gone by, and there's been Zoom availability, and it's not the same. And I remember, again, we spoke about this when we first met in the interview series, how, this is going to be a completely different, this is going to be different, where, you're not going to have that access that you once had, and everything, the unknown, the light was not at the end of the tunnel now. And here we are, the light is at the end of the tunnel, and we're all walking through it, which is fantastic. And for you, DB, you're able to now go back into the locker room and make those connections again. How cool is that we're beyond where we were a couple of years ago when you and I first met and got to talk about your life and everything along those lines. And, now you're able to go meet with the guys again.
Well, when fans say it doesn't matter, who cares? It matters a lot. Like, if you want better stories about these guys, like, where you sit and have conversations with them in the locker room on off days, and it matters a lot, right? Because nobody likes, and just from an emotional standpoint, nobody wanted to walk in the locker rooms with a mask, right? I was one of 3 American journalists, media at the bubble in Edmonton for the Stanley Cup final. That was great. I made history. It was the worst thing in the world, sitting in an empty building with no fans in Edmonton, a beautiful building, and playing Stanley Cup final between Dallas and Tampa Bay. It was horrible. So it's great. It's great for everyone. It's great for the players because they get more publicity and they get more. And here's what it also does. Like, remember, I think it was last season when Leon Draisaitl and Jim Matheson had a little spat there about Jim knows everything. And well, if we had locker room access, that spat never becomes public. Because if Leon has a beef, or if any writer has a beef with a writer of one of the Kings, although I've never had a beef with anybody in Los Angeles because I treat people fairly, but if there's a beef on an off day, Leon could grab Jim and they can have a private conversation in the room and square things out. You can't do that over Zoom. You can't do that when you get in the locker rooms, right? Relationships went out the window. Any new player that came into LA, like a Byfield or Kaliev, you don't get to know these guys because they try them out. And it's not the Kings' fault. I'm not blaming them. They'll try them out every 5 or 6 days, and you'll talk to them for a couple of minutes, as opposed to every day when you're there pregame, when you're there on an off day, when you're there for morning skates. It changes the dynamic considerably with respect to storytelling. So I think we all benefit from it. And again, it's normal. I can't wait. And look, I went to their rookie camp, and I was in the Ontario Reign locker room with the kids, but I was, I didn't have a mask on. It was great. But I can't wait for next Thursday where we kind of walk in the locker room and say to Drew Dowdy, hey, Drew, you never wanted us in the locker rooms anymore, but guess what? We're back.
I cannot wait to see that reaction too when from him when you tell him that. That's fantastic. I mean, listen, and again, as both Mike and I were a part of the media as well for obviously not professional but college stuff. It's really good that that'll all be happening. So I personally am very happy for you and for the entire for all media that way. My last question for you, DB, before Mike takes it over. The Rams, I mean, you were there. Listen, what happened? I picked them in my survivor pool. I'm out. Thanks a lot. Unbelievable.
I wouldn't be picking against the Bills, a team against the Bills in the survivor pool, number one. Number two, like, are you like a Jet fan?
No, I'm an Eagles fan.
Okay, well, they did well. What happened? They played a damn good team.
Yep.
That's what they did. Josh Allen's fantastic, and not people. Their defense is. Von Miller had 2 sacks. He was a wild man. So it was the wrong team to open up against. And I get it. It was Thursday night, and you want to open up against one of the elite teams against elite teams. And look, they missed Andrew Whitworth. It's not the same team. They miss OBJ. It's not. It's still a real. And I love. Look, Cooper Kupp's my man. Matthew Stafford proved everybody wrong. But that's a tough opener. Now, if it's the same result on Sunday against the Atlanta Falcons, then I'll be worried. But one game, one season, then I see San Francisco lose. They don't look great. I mean, Seattle's leading the division with Geno Smith as the quarterback, so I'm not worried yet.
Mike, conclude this. Conclude our always laughing chat with DB.
Yeah, so DB, just to round it up overall in the division, you alluded to it before. Are we looking at, in terms of the standings, are we looking at a similar sort of playoff picture? Is it going to be a little bit tightening in the standings? Who's going to win the Pacific Division? How many points is it going to take?
Well, to Mike, to answer the question, I don't think the winner's going to have 111 like they did last season. I think there's more strength at the bottom of the division. Teams are a little bit better. So I think you're probably looking at maybe 105. I think it'll be a dogfight, and I think it's probably a 3-team dance between Calgary, Edmonton, and Los Angeles. So I think that you're looking at 105, 106 wins of the division. I'll stick with Calgary because I think the impact of the players that they added, like it kind of regenerates that team, right? Because you had guys there. I'm saying, okay, Johnny's leaving, Kachuk's going to walk. What's going to happen with this team? And now, wow, like this team is serious, and it galvanizes the rest of the depth chart. When you see Tree go and get Naz Kadri, like he's not messing around. Like we want to win. Like we're not happy and we're not satisfied. And everybody says nobody wants to play in Calgary. Well, Jonathan Huberdeau wants to play in Calgary. Now, granted, I might want to play in Calgary for $10.5 million a year. But I think it's a close race. It could go down to the last weekend, a more competitive division, I think, top to bottom. I'll still say Calgary will win it, and I'll probably say with 105 points. But it wouldn't shock me if L.A. or Edmonton rose up and grabbed it. But I think it does go down to the final couple of days of the regular season before we see the winner. But I'll go with Calgary as a repeat performer. Doesn't mean they'll go far in the playoffs, but I like them to still win the division, albeit much closer than last season.
Ooh, that's going to be something to watch for with, as DB did say, a tighter division with the bottom 3 getting a little bit better, with the exception, of course, of San Jose, because that's just an absolute disaster. And we didn't really talk about them because that's just all negativity. Ladies and gentlemen, our good friend Dennis Bernstein, DB, one of the co-hosts of The Hot Stove, powered by the Fourth Period, on Saturday mornings from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern time on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio Channel 91. DB, as always, thank you so much for coming on here. And when do you guys go back on? You, Pates, and Dave go back on.
It's this. I believe it's October 8th. It's the second Saturday, so it's right. Yeah, October 8th is the second Saturday in October. The opening night's the 11th, so we'll come back on the air on October 8th. I'll also be doing probably doing some co-hosting work with Steve Koulias on the power play from 3 to 6 Eastern as well. I sat in usually about once a week last season. You have guys like Shane O'Brien, Mike Robb, Marty Baron also co-hosting, but look for me to return there. But first show for Hot Stove, 11 o'clock Eastern, is October 8th, right before the season starts on the 11th.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, also on the bottom, too, you'll be able to find DB on Twitter at DennisTFP for everything LA Kings and really all the National Hockey League. DB, as always, thank you, my friend, for coming on. Always a pleasure, and we will see you soon.
Double J, Mike, thanks for the time on the Primetime Rundown. Great talking to you.
All right, thanks. We'll see you soon. Well, Mike, it has been a fun one with DB, of course, and it's always a fun time with DB. Always a fun time.
Yeah, just fantastic stuff. Always good stuff from him, and a real good roundup of the division. And love the interesting insight there. Looks like things will be a little bit tighter. We spoke about it off air, how much the movement there was in the Pacific Division. That was probably, as a collective division as a whole, was probably some of the more active in the NHL. So could be in for an interesting year.
Yeah, I mean, and again, just by looking at to give my quick take, I personally believe that San Jose, as we did say, is going to be at the bottom of the barrel. Anaheim will be right above it. I expect LA to do not as good as they were last year, but again, when you have a playmaker like Kevin Fiala, as what DB said, I know that they don't have a lot of depth, but there's a few players that need to definitely step up, and one's Lias Anderson, and other one's Brendan Lemieux, obviously to Ranger, legends, of course. Quentin Byfield, too. There's so many solid things, and there's another team that we didn't really talk about much was Anaheim. Ryan Strome, Frank Vetrano joining them. Now, I feel like Vetrano might have been a one-year wonder. I think if he would have re-signed with the Rangers, it would have been a little bit better because he's got that chemistry there already. And I think they're going to miss him, the Rangers, which we'll get to in a few weeks. But that top line presence on the wing, on the right side anyway, will definitely be missed. It's going to be tough out in Anaheim. Like I said, we didn't really talk about them much. But we'll see what happens. It's going to be a fun National Hockey League season. And next week, Mike, I'm right back here in Philly. You'll be back home in Queens, and we'll be talking the Central Division. We'll be talking about first off, obviously the Stanley Cup champs, the Colorado Avalanche, and we'll be going down the list. We'll be talking about, of course, what Arizona brings in their 5,000 seat arena shared with the Arizona State Sun Devils, an absolute disaster of a franchise. How the NHL is allowing them to play there is beyond me. But hey, listen, I think that would be really cool. All of those ticket prices are actually astronomical. Why? Yeah. Because it's again supply and demand. There's a lot of demand to go see an NHL team pretty much play in like Kraft Hockeyville games for 41 games. And for those that don't know, Kraft Hockeyville, they're played in little buildings, right? The NHL gives some money, Kraft donates some money as well, and it's almost like they're playing in like Iceworks out in Syosset for those that know the former Islanders practice facility. What a disaster! We'll also be talking about Chicago, Dallas, Minnesota. They've got $12 million in dead cap. Dallas, they're going to have Jake Ottinger, who's going to be signed. I think he signed already that long-term deal, 3 years. St. Louis has been re-signing guys, Jordan Kyrou, Rob Thomas. So those things like that are going. Winnipeg, that's another big deal too. Today, Blake Wheeler's captaincy was stripped today because Rick Bowness wants a full view of what's going to be for this team. This is a team that's really in purgatory right now. So I don't know what's going to be in the Central, but again, this is a clear-cut Colorado division that I don't know if they can, if they'll ever relinquish it. Again, Nashville too. Nashville looked okay, but again, they're coached by John Hines. They do have Ryan McDonough there now as well, but he's aging. So a lot of cool things coming up, Mike, in that Central Division.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be a real interesting start to the year in the NHL, and we're going through our preview division, and a lot to talk about there in the Central, as you just laid out. Some of the storylines really well there, a lot of turnover, and a good collection of teams that there's a lot of uncertainty of where the direction of their franchise really is.
Yeah, really crazy stuff there. So with that being said, we will end a little bit early today just because we've pretty much run through everything, Mike. It's been a fun show. Again, it's been a fun time. So cannot thank DB enough for coming on. And let's get to our kudos. Mike, it's all you.
Well, going back to what we started almost the show with, and again, not taking for granted, kudos to Aaron Judge for taking the risk and betting on himself this year. We've said it time and time again, and betting on himself, not taking the long-term extension. And we'll see what the numbers wind up being in the offseason. And that's going to be a tense discussion we'll have in a few weeks and months' time. But, he's massively won the betting on himself and whatnot. It's having, just as I said before at the beginning of our show, just one of the best individual seasons from a Major League Baseball player in the last 20 years. Kudos to him for what what he's been producing. There was, of course, that viral video in the offseason where he was taking batting swings in the cage and whatnot, and he's joking. He's like, "Oh, I'm going to hit 50 again this year," and he's hit that and much more. And I think you even have to put him on Triple Crown watch with what he's doing in the American League. And we'll talk about the MVP discussion later on, which he could put the grievances gif up there, because that's just ridiculous. The conversation that's causing. I don't care if I'm a New Yorker, a Yankees fan, or biased or whatever. Absolutely ridiculous that's even a conversation and a debate. But more on that later. But just kudos to him, and go get that record, man. Get it as quick as possible, so next week we can have even more kudos.
Well, next week also is episode number 100. Episode 100 is next week, and we will be bringing back something that a lot of folks have not heard since the days pre-COVID. That is the only hint that I will give away tonight. The only hint I'll give away is that there will be a few things that we will be reviving from the first 5 episodes will be on next week. Going to be tons of fun. Mike, my kudos goes to veteran Fox Sports reporter and Erin Andrews. Now, I don't know, for those that typically keep up with media stories or anything along those lines, I usually keep up with Sports Business Journal, a lot of things regarding the sports media and everything like that. But this one made it all around social media and all around every single news outlet, MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, everything. Mike, Erin Andrews was in, they did the Minnesota and Green Bay Packers game last week. Greg Olsen, Kevin Burkhardt, and Erin Andrews, right? During an appearance, how we found out about this, Erin Andrews has a podcast with Carissa Thompson, who is one of the Fox Sports hosts for Fox NFL Kickoff, and also one of the hosts for Thursday Night Football as well on Amazon Prime. Calm Down with Erin and Carissa. Erin said that she had planned to take her car service from Chicago to Green Bay, so she could listen in on some conference calls. She can, figure a few things out ahead of her big interview with Aaron Rodgers, right? Which we eventually saw last week. But in that time span, there was a little bit of a problem with her driver. Now, she had a driver, I guess a limo driver. Now, she didn't go into that. The driver fell asleep behind the wheel. And the reason why she found out about it was because she heard snoring and the car was moving, was pretty much swaying. She flat out said that was not a way that she wanted to die. That was not a way that she wanted to go out. So what did she do for the driver? She immediately said, "Are you effing sleeping?" And apparently the guy woke up, whatever, and she told him, "Stop over at this McDonald's. I'm going to get you a coffee right now." So she runs into the McDonald's. She gets him a coffee. He doesn't drink it. And it was an awkward moment of silence the rest of the way. But the reason why my kudos goes to her is because as a media member, you're in the process of doing all of this, but your life is also at risk too. You're in the backseat of a car, of a limo. You're driving up from Chicago to Green Bay, which, by the way, it's a little bit of a drive. You're driving all the way up there, and your driver falls asleep behind the wheel. For those that are out there that are just tired, pull over. If you can't do it, pull over. I've had my experience of that before. Just pull over, and that's exactly where we will leave it. So, crazy stuff has gone on in the sports world the last week. And as you can see, too, things happening all across the country in terms of sports, both on the field, off the field, everything along those lines. So let's conclude our show with of course our good friends from the Essential Wrestling Podcast. on Tuesday night, September 20th, 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. The guys Al Carl, John DeConi, John Smith, and Gary Miheffi will be back with you to recap everything that has gone down in the world of wrestling, only right here on the Eastern Observer. Also can be heard too on Odyssey, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and all of the above. Of course, our show, the Primetime Rundown, powered by StreamYard, will return next Friday, episode number 100. We've got a ton of surprises for you. We're going to have some good things to show you all next week. Our show can be seen right here on the Eastern Observer by subscribing to us on YouTube. And of course, you could listen to it on Odyssey, Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcasts. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, too, as we always show, be sure to search the Primetime Rundown on YouTube and, of course, on all of the audio platforms. And please hit that subscribe button. We really appreciate it. And the same thing goes for also our friends at the Essential Wrestling Podcast. Be sure to search the exact title and hit that subscribe button by also searching the Eastern Observer at the following platforms as well. So that's where we conclude. So back here, I will be in Philadelphia next week. It will be, that's where we'll be. We won't have the backdrop for the next few weeks, but it's going to be Mike holding down the fort back home in New York. And episode 100, Mike. Can't believe that we are going to have 3 digits after tonight in this show.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. And when, it seems like so long ago and first coming on with you guys, recurring guest and whatnot, and it seems so far ago, and it was like episode 60s, 70s and whatnot. And we've come all this way, all these weeks, fantastic shows. We've had such great guests on over the last, year, months, whatever that I've been in and out and now full time on. We've had a lot of great conversations, a lot of great moments, and fantastic to get to number 100. And, God bless for the amazing times that we've had. And, here's to another 100.
Absolutely. Cannot wait to show everyone what episode 100 will be like. Ladies and gentlemen, for my co-host, Mike Szabo, our good friend Ian Schraier, who's out on paternity leave, he will be with us later on in the year. I'm Joey Jarzynka, and for all of us here at the Primetime Rundown in the Eastern Observer and the Blackjack Media Group, we will see you all next Friday night when we host episode 100 right here on the Eastern Observer. So long, everybody.